White House denounces Tucker Carlson for recent viral interview. Carlson, they're warmonger freaks. They don't get the moral high ground. The White House has condemned Tucker Carlson for a recent viral interview he conducted with a historian. On Monday, the independent broadcaster released an interview with podcaster Daryl Cooper, whom Carlson referred to as the best and most honest popular historian in the U.S. The viral episode, which is approaching 30 million views on X, has resulted in Cooper's martyr-made podcast topping the iTunes charts and surpassing Carlson's podcast. Wow. During the wide-ranging 2-hour interview, Cooper offered a heterodox view of Winston Churchill. Quote, I think maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War, Cooper said. He didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. He was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did. In a statement issued to CNN, the Biden administration Senior Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates said giving a microphone to a Holocaust denier who spreads Nazi propaganda is a disgusting and sadistic insult to all Americans, to the memory of over 6 million Jews who were genocidally murdered by Adolf Hitler, to the service of the millions of Americans who fought to defeat Nazism, and to every subsequent victim of anti-Semitism. Hitler was one of the most evil figures in human history and the chief villain of World War II, full stop. The Biden-Harris administration believes that trafficking in this moral rot is unacceptable at any time, let alone less than 1 year after the deadliest massacre perpetrated against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and at a time when the cancer of anti-Semitism is growing all over the world. I gotta say, I have not listened to the full interview that Tucker Carlson did. I did see a lot of people saying that there was a mix of conservative and liberal personalities misquoting what Cooper had been saying in the podcast. I would say this, for my opinion on this. I think it's silly to say Churchill was the chief villain. I understand the point he's trying to make. Responsibility in war is not, it's not, we're not facing comic book villains. But, I gotta be honest, like, dude, Hitler was the chief villain. And I know there's a lot of people who are going to make arguments about the heterodox nature of things like, in this.
Yeah, it's called relativism. And it's, this is a
Churchill,
this is a postmodern, deconstructivist approach to history from a right-wing perspective instead of a left-wing perspective, but it's still exactly the same thing.
Yeah, look, my view is you absolutely can criticize Churchill. I read a decent amount about, I read Cooper's thread on why he's critical of Churchill, and I'm like, look, my opinion is that he's critical of Churchill for waging war on a country at war, and he didn't like the tactics used. Hitler killed people for psychotic reasons. Like that was like a psychotic. I mean, look, the argument, I suppose, outside of what he's saying is if you drive people to the brink of starvation and insanity and demoralization and conquest and then let it stew, they will bubble up and go insane. But to claim that Churchill is the chief villain, I think is just not correct.
Yeah, I agree.
Did you guys listen to the podcast?
So I listened to clips of it. I didn't listen to the full thing. But I just looking at it through analyzing history, I think a lot of Americans don't understand. The Allies did commit some atrocities, and then also the fact that the Allies, stood with Stalin, and Stalin committed, the Holodomor, a lot of these different, genocides, and I think because they were largely with the Allies, and the Allies have kind of wrote a lot of the history, and it's kind of the founding mythos of our, modern politics. I think it is important to kind of look critically at that. I wouldn't agree that Winston Churchill was the main villain of World War II, but I as with any political leader, they're not perfect, and I think it is kind of important to look at.
Even Mussolini was worse than Churchill.
So Carlson responded saying, the fact that these lunatics have used the Churchill myth to bring our country closer to nuclear war than at any moment in history disgusts me and should terrify every American, he wrote in a text message to the outlet. They're warmonger freaks. They don't get the moral high ground. Though Cooper has not directly addressed the White House statement, he mentioned the controversy in an interview in a Thursday evening X post. The furor over my Tucker interview is straight replay of the very fine people hoax. Totally mendacious, claiming the literal opposite of what was actually said. Too shameless to care that people can easily go see the video themselves. During his interview with Carlson, Cooper clarified his comments, saying that, this is a quote, and the next thought comes to your head is that, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Hitler and so forth, were the protagonists, right? They're the good guys. If you think he's a villain, that's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. He says, Germany, look, they put themselves in a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime was responsible for it. That when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth, that they're going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that, and they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. Cooper then argued that components of the traditional narrative of World War II have become akin to modern American mythology. I suppose if the greater point he's saying is that Adolf Hitler, in his idealistic fervor and desire for, seizing back land and expanding German territory, captured, imprisoned, and then killed millions of people. Like, I don't know. I don't really. I just feel like it's, pulling hairs. I suppose the argument is there are stupid people who don't understand history and think it's some, can't stand to hear about laying out what happened and how it happened. I feel like once you read all of it, you still conclude that Hitler is the bad guy. I don't know that he's saying
I feel
Churchill
that way
is.
too. I think Hitler is probably the evil person.
Probably.
There's probably others, like Mussolini wasn't great. Stalin was a terrible guy. That being said, you need allies in war. War doesn't mean you team up with your best friends and go on an expedition. War means that you're struggling to save your nation from, obliteration and to save your allies from obliteration. And you have to make really hard choices. I know this is not a popular thing to say, but I listened to a bunch of interviews with Condoleezza Rice after she left the Bush administration. And I think she is a really interesting, I think she's very intelligent, and I think she thinks things through all the way, which is not something that happens very much anymore. But she said, she was asked about the Iraq War, right, which was, in my view, a really bad idea. And she said, we had to decide between several really bad alternatives. There were no good options, right? In World War II, were there a bunch of really good options and the U.S. and Britain just took the ones that were the worst? I don't think there were good options available. And I think that is important to remember, that when you're facing this kind of thing, which we could be facing ourselves, are there a lot of good options available when it comes to Israel or when it comes to Ukraine? Every option leads to some kind of death and destruction and horribleness. Right. Every single option. Getting involved is bad. Not getting involved also leads to bad things. It doesn't matter what you do, which option you pick, something bad is going to happen. Whether it's, immediately for your nation or somebody else's, or for your allies, or for all of the children, or whatever. Pick your victim class.
I'll put it in a modern context, I suppose. I can't, because I'm not going to sit here and speak about, I don't know. Look, I read Cooper's thread on Churchill, and it's very interesting, where he makes the points that blockade, starvation created desperation and anger and a generation of angry young men and all of these things. He didn't say that literally, but it's the general idea, I suppose. And among other things, that wasn't the principal message. But you look at right now with Ukraine, and I think it's fair to say that Putin's the bad guy. But I don't think it's fair to say that his Putin's goal is the conquest of Europe, that he takes Ukraine, he's going to take Poland. I think that is exaggeration. Those are exaggerations to justify foreign, namely U.S. and NATO involvement in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. He should not have. The U.S. was engaged in a soft power battle that it was winning, and that's preferable to hot conflict.
Yeah.
Vladimir Putin decided hot conflict was better because he didn't want to lose a soft power battle, and I think that is wrong. He could the original. So what happens in Ukraine is the East and the West were offering up money and opportunity. Putin said to Ukraine, if you do a deal with the EU, we will cut off our trade agreement with you. And then Ukraine said, okay, then we're going to go with the wealthier Western European and NATO. And so Putin got pissed and was like, what? Well, yeah. And his argument was, the Russian argument, that if Ukraine opened up trade to Western Europe, those products would then freely flow into Russia and disrupt their economy, so we had to cut them off. And then by doing so, lost the soft power battle, offered up nothing in return to the Ukrainians, and then decided to instead invade. I think that was a stupid thing to do. And I think he's a guy who tries to hold on to power for a long time. That being said, that doesn't justify U.S. funding a conflict in a country we have nothing to, that is not us. And the argument they've made is that, well, they may join NATO. I mean, why are we expanding on Russia's border as it is and creating this potential problem? That being said, I can understand soft power versus hot conflict, but why are we now, after this is all going down, deciding that we are going to be involved militaristically in this conflict, or that I or any other American should support the funding of hundreds of billions of dollars going to this country that is not one of our allies?
There's also this crazy thing now. You know how the U.S. is giving. Oh, you have a fly on your head there. It's gone away.
There's always a fly in here.
Yeah, I just didn't want to.
There's two of them.
You know, there.
Because we have the door, the everything's
Yeah.
open. Yeah.
But the
Now it's on your head.
Oh, come on. You know I don't like bugs. What was I going to say? Oh, so Ukraine's taking all of these weapons from the U.S., but they also put together all these deals with the help of the U.S. to have defense and munitions companies in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And so now they're making their own weapons. And you know what they're doing with those? They are selling them out of the country.
Ukraine is?
Yeah. This is something we covered at Human Events the other day.
Wow.
And it's just like, so you're taking our stuff.
Well,
You're taking a bunch of contracts so that you can build your own stuff.
It's the business for.
And now you're selling that. Well, you have anyway.
We know about the fortifications that never got built.
Yes.
I mean, it's crazy that you have people on X that are just blindly putting up the Ukrainian flags and saying, woo, we're going to support them no matter what. And I'm like, we gave a bunch of money to these companies that were fake. The government knew, and then the money was taken by criminals and they ran. Mm-hmm. It is insanity.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.